My billionaire CEO X passed out at his Christmas gala, and the one who saved him was our secret son he abandoned. Does anyone have medical training? The security guard's voice cut through the panicked murmurs as Dominic Westbrook, billionaire CEO and my ex, lay unconscious on the marble floor of his own Christmas gala. The ambulance is on its way, but I do. My heart stopped. That voice, confident, steady, and achingly familiar. I turned to see my 16-year-old son pushing through the crowd of designer gowns and tuxedos. Lucas, I whispered, but he didn't hear me, already kneeling beside the fallen man. I'm a certified EMT, he told the security guard, his hands moving with practiced precision to check Dominic's pulse. Part of my hospital internship program. I stood frozen, watching as my son, with his father's strong profile and my determined chin, efficiently assessed the condition of the man who had once called him a distraction and wrote a check to take care of it. The man who had no idea that the teenager now potentially saving his life was his own flesh and blood. Have you ever witnessed your carefully guarded secrets unraveling before your eyes? Have you felt that moment when your past and present collide with such force that you can barely breathe? If you've ever had to face the consequences of choices made long ago, stay with me for a story that will remind you that sometimes life has a way of bringing us full circle in the most unexpected ways. I'm Mr. Harrison, and today's tale is about how one moment at a Christmas gala changed 3 lives forever. Hi, my beautiful sisters. This story is for every woman who's ever had to stand alone when someone walked away. For every mother who's sacrificed dreams, sleep, and security to give her child a beautiful life. For every heart that's been broken by someone who chose ambition over love. Your strength isn't measured by never falling, but by rising every time life knocks you down. Maya's journey reminds us that sometimes our greatest triumphs come from our deepest wounds, and that raising a child with love and integrity is the most powerful success story of all. You are stronger than you know, more capable than you believe, and your worth isn't determined by those who couldn't see your value. If this message speaks to your heart, please hit that like button and let me know you're here. The first snowflakes of December drifted lazily past the windows of my apartment as I stared at the invitation that had arrived that morning. Embossed gold lettering on heavy cream cardstock, Westbrook Industries' annual Christmas Gala. Exclusive, elegant, and the last place on earth I wanted to be. You're not seriously considering going, are you? My sister Vivian's voice crackled through my phone speaker, concern evident even through the digital distortion. I ran my finger over the raised lettering, feeling the sharp edges of the W that had once been part of my own name. I don't have much choice. The foundation I work for depends on Westbrook funding. If I don't show up, it could jeopardize our entire youth program. After what he did to you, after what he did to Lucas. The outrage in Vivian's voice mirrored the anger I'd spent years carefully containing, transforming into something more productive than bitterness. It's been 16 years, Viv. I've moved on. The lie tasted familiar on my tongue, worn smooth from repetition. Have you? Because normal moving on doesn't usually involve keeping your son a secret from his father for his entire life. I closed my eyes, the familiar guilt washing over me. That was his choice, not mine. He made it perfectly clear he wanted nothing to do with us. The memory surfaced unbidden, standing in Dominic Westbrook's penthouse office, 22 years old and terrified, the pregnancy test results clutched in my trembling hand, the coldness in his eyes when I told him, the calculated way he'd opened his checkbook. I'll take care of it, he'd said, not even looking up as he wrote the check. My assistant will arrange the appointment. When I'd found my voice, found the courage to tell him I was keeping our baby, his expression hadn't changed. Then you'll do it without me. I'm 3 months away from the Nakamura merger. I don't have time for distractions. Distractions. That's what our child had been to him. What I had been, a brief amusement, a distraction from building his empire. Maya, are you still there? Vivian's voice pulled me back to the present. Yes, sorry. I set the invitation down, turning away from it as if distance could diminish its power. Look, it's one night. I'll make an appearance, speak to the right people about funding, and leave before anyone even notices I'm there. And if you run into him, Dominic will be too busy playing host to notice me. Besides, he's probably forgotten I exist. Another lie. Dominic Westbrook never forgot anything. It was one of the qualities that had made him a billionaire before 40. His mind was a steel trap, cataloging every detail, every advantage, every weakness to be exploited. No, he wouldn't have forgotten me. He simply wouldn't care. What about Lucas? Vivian asked, her voice softening. Does he know you're going? Lucas, my brilliant, compassionate son who had his father's analytical mind and, thankfully, none of his ruthlessness. At 16, he was already taking advanced placement courses, his sights set on medical school. No, and I'm not planning to tell him. He's staying with you that weekend anyway for his research program. This will all be over before he gets back. Maya. Vivian's tone held a warning. Secrets have a way of unraveling at the worst possible moments. Trust me on this. I knew she was right. As a family law attorney, Vivian had seen enough secrets explode in courtrooms to fill a lifetime of cautionary tales. But this secret had been kept for 16 years, wrapped in layers of protection and half-truths. What were the chances it would unravel in a single evening? I'll be careful, I promised. Nothing is going to happen. If you've ever told yourself that nothing could possibly go wrong, only to have life prove you spectacularly incorrect, hit that like button right now. Sometimes the universe has a way of laughing at our certainty. I first met Dominic Westbrook 17 years ago, when I was a 21-year-old graduate student interning at his rapidly growing tech company. Back then, Westbrook Industries was still an upstart challenging the established players, and Dominic was its brilliant, driven founder with a reputation for both innovation and ruthlessness. You're the one who found the security flaw in the prototype, he said the first time we spoke, appearing suddenly beside my workstation late one evening when most of the office had emptied. I'd been working overtime, determined to prove my worth. I looked up, startled to find myself face to face with the company's legendary founder. Yes, I submitted the report last week. Directly to me, bypassing 3 levels of management. His tone gave nothing away, but his gray eyes studied me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. That was either very brave or very foolish. The flaw needed immediate attention, I replied, refusing to be intimidated despite the nervous flutter in my stomach. And sometimes bureaucracy gets in the way of efficiency. To my surprise, he laughed. A genuine sound that transformed his usually serious face. I couldn't agree more. Have dinner with me. I want to hear more about your ideas for improving our security protocols. That dinner led to another, and another. Dominic was unlike anyone I'd ever met. Brilliant, focused, with a vision for technology that seemed almost prophetic. When we were together, he made me feel like the only person in the world who mattered, who truly understood his ambitions. I mistook his intensity for depth, his focus for passion. You see things others miss, he told me one night, his fingers tracing patterns on my bare shoulder as we lay in his penthouse bedroom. You understand what I'm building here. I did understand, or thought I did. I believed we were partners in vision, if not yet in life, equals despite the disparity in our positions. I didn't realize then that Dominic saw everything and everyone in terms of utility. Value added or value diminished, assets or liabilities. When I discovered I was pregnant 5 months into our relationship, I was terrified but also secretly hopeful. Surely this would cement what we had, transform our relationship from an intense affair into something permanent, something family. I planned the moment carefully, choosing an evening when Dominic seemed relaxed, when a major project had just been successfully completed. I made dinner at his penthouse, wore the blue dress he liked, and waited until we'd finished eating before placing the positive test on the table between us. What's this? He asked, though the sudden stillness in his body told me he already knew. I'm pregnant, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. About 8 weeks. He stared at the test for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he stood and walked to his desk, removing his checkbook from the drawer. I'll take care of it, he said, pen moving across paper with practiced efficiency. My assistant will arrange the appointment. Discretion is assured. The clinical coldness of his response froze me in place. Dominic, I thought we might discuss this together. He looked up then, his eyes meeting mine with a detachment that chilled me to the bone. There's nothing to discuss. This is a simple problem with a simple solution. And if I want to keep the baby? The question escaped before I could stop it. A desperate hope I hadn't even fully acknowledged to myself. Then you'll do it without me. He tore the check from the book and placed it on the table. I'm 3 months away from the Nakamura merger. I don't have time for distractions. Distractions. The word cut deeper than any insult could have. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity what I had been to Dominic Westbrook. Not a partner, not even a person with her own dreams and value, but a temporary amusement. A distraction from the empire building that consumed him. I left his penthouse that night with my dignity intact but my heart shattered. The check left untouched on his immaculate dining table. 2 days later, I resigned from my internship. A week after that, I moved out of my apartment to a different borough, determined to put as much distance between myself and Dominic Westbrook as possible while still remaining in the city I loved. I never cashed his check. I never contacted him again. And when Lucas was born 7 months later, beautiful, perfect, with his father's strong profile and my determined chin, I gave him my last name and vowed that he would never know the coldness of rejection from the man who had helped create him. If you've ever had to rebuild your life from scratch with a broken heart and uncertain future, let me know in the comments. Your story of resilience matters, and you're not alone. The years that followed were both the hardest and most rewarding of my life. Single motherhood while finishing my graduate studies tested every ounce of my strength and determination. There were nights I cried from exhaustion after Lucas finally fell asleep. Mornings I wondered how I would manage another day of juggling childcare, classes, and part-time work. But there was also joy, pure, transcendent joy in watching my son grow. His first smile, his first steps, the way his eyes lit up when he discovered something new. Lucas was a bright, curious child with an innate kindness that sometimes brought tears to my eyes. How could someone so wonderful have come from such a painful beginning? You're doing an amazing job with him, Vivian told me on Lucas's 5th birthday, watching as he meticulously explained his new science kit to a group of captivated kindergartners. He's thriving, Maya. We're managing, I said, though pride swelled in my chest at her words. More than managing. Look at him, he's confident, kind, brilliant. And he adores you. He did adore me and I him. We were a team, Lucas and I, navigating the world together. I never spoke ill of his absent father, even when Lucas began asking questions around age 6. Where's my dad? He asked one night as I tucked him into bed. Tommy and Michael and Zoe all have dads. Even Lily has 2 moms. I just have you. I had prepared for this moment, rehearsed my answer countless times. Your father was a graduate student I dated briefly. When I told him about you, he wasn't ready to be a parent. Some people aren't ready for that responsibility. Was he bad? No, honey, not bad. Just focused on different things. On his career, his future. Doesn't he want to know me now? Lucas's eyes, so like his father's in shape if not in warmth, searched my face for answers I couldn't give. I don't know, I said honestly. We haven't been in touch. But what I do know is that I wanted you more than anything in the world, and that hasn't changed for a single moment since you were born. Lucas seemed to accept this, though the questions returned occasionally over the years, becoming less frequent as he grew older and built his own identity separate from the mystery of his absent father. By the time he was 12, he had developed a passionate interest in medicine, volunteering at the local hospital's youth program and devouring medical textbooks far beyond his grade level. I want to help people, he told me when I asked what drew him to medicine. I want to make a difference when it matters most. And he was making a difference. By 16, Lucas had completed EMT certification as part of a special hospital internship program for gifted students. He maintained perfect grades while volunteering, participating in science competitions, and somehow still finding time to be a normal teenager with friends and interests beyond academics. I had built a good life for us too. After years of hard work, I had established myself in the nonprofit sector, eventually becoming the program director for the Brightwood Foundation, an organization dedicated to providing educational opportunities for underprivileged youth. The work was meaningful, the salary decent if not extravagant, and it allowed me to provide Lucas with a stable, comfortable life. We had everything we needed, everything except the truth. The truth that his father wasn't some nameless graduate student who had disappeared from our lives, but Dominic Westbrook, whose face occasionally appeared on business magazines at the grocery checkout, whose company had grown into a tech giant with global influence, whose wealth and power had only increased in the years since he had dismissed our unborn child as a distraction. I had kept tabs on Dominic over the years, not out of lingering attachment but out of caution. Knowledge was protection. I knew he had never married, though there had been a string of relationships with models and socialites. I knew Westbrook Industries had expanded into new markets, making him one of the youngest billionaires in the country. I knew he had a reputation for brilliant strategy and merciless execution in business dealings. What I didn't know, what never occurred to me until that fateful Christmas gala, was whether he knew about Lucas. Whether in all his meticulous information gathering, his strategic planning, he had ever discovered that he had a son growing up just miles from his corporate headquarters. 2 weeks after receiving the invitation, as my taxi pulled up to the glittering facade of the Grand Meridian Hotel, those words I'd spoken to Vivian echoed in my mind like a taunt. Nothing is going to happen. I smoothed the midnight blue silk of my dress, simple but elegant, chosen specifically to help me blend into the background, and took a steadying breath. The ballroom was a winter wonderland of silver and blue, ice sculptures glittering under crystal chandeliers, the city's elite mingling in designer finery. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, using it more as a prop than a drink as I scanned the room for the foundation's director. The sooner I could connect with her, make the necessary introductions to potential donors, the sooner I could leave. Maya Reynolds. The voice behind me sent a jolt through my system, familiar despite the years that had passed. I turned slowly, schooling my features into polite neutrality. Dominic. He looked the same, yet different. The sharp features that had graced countless magazine covers were perhaps a touch more defined, the dark hair now threaded with distinguished silver at the temples. But his eyes, those penetrating gray eyes that seemed to dissect everything they observed, were unchanged. "I'm surprised to see you here." His tone was conversational, as if we were old acquaintances who had simply lost touch, not former lovers with a chasm of unspoken history between us. "I represent the Brightwood Foundation now. We're one of your grant recipients." I kept my voice professional, distant. "Ah yes, the Youth Education Initiative." He nodded, taking a sip of his scotch. "Impressive results from what I've seen in the reports." Of course he'd read the reports. Dominic never invested in anything without scrutinizing every detail. It was what had made Westbrook Industries a powerhouse under his leadership, that relentless attention to data, to patterns, to potential. "We're proud of our work," I said simply. "The funding has made a significant difference." "I'm sure it has." His gaze swept over me, assessing in a way that made me feel transparent. "You look well, Maya." "Thank you. If you'll excuse me, I need to find Director Harlow." I moved to step past him, but his next words froze me in place. "How is your son?" The champagne glass nearly slipped from my fingers. I turned back slowly, heart hammering against my ribs. "What?" Dominic's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. Something that might have been curiosity, or perhaps something deeper. "Lucas, isn't it? I believe he recently won the regional science competition with a project on cellular regeneration." My mind raced. How did he know? Had he been keeping tabs on us all these years? The thought sent a chill through me despite the crowded warmth of the ballroom. "My son's achievements are not up for discussion," I said, my voice low but firm. "Especially not with someone who made it abundantly clear he wanted no part in his life." A muscle twitched in Dominic's jaw, the only sign that my words had any impact. "People change, Maya. Do they? Or do they just find new ways to justify the same behaviors?" I set my untouched champagne on a nearby table. "Enjoy your evening, Dominic." Your gala is lovely. I walked away, my composure intact only through years of practice at hiding my true feelings. Inside, I was in turmoil. Dominic knew about Lucas, not just of his existence, but specific details about his accomplishments. The carefully constructed separation I'd maintained between my past and present was suddenly, alarmingly porous. If you've ever had that moment when you realize someone has been watching your life from a distance, hit that like button. There's something uniquely unsettling about discovering you've been observed when you thought you were invisible. I found Director Harlow near one of the ice sculptures, deep in conversation with a group of potential donors. For the next hour, I performed my role perfectly. Articulate, passionate about our mission, graciously accepting compliments on the Foundation's work. All while my mind churned with questions and my eyes involuntarily tracked Dominic's movement through the crowd. He was in his element here, commanding attention without effort, the perfect host. I watched as he charmed elderly board members and young entrepreneurs alike, that calculated smile appearing and disappearing as needed. This was the man I'd fallen for at 21, brilliant, ambitious, seemingly unstoppable. I'd mistaken his intensity for passion, his focus for depth. By the time I understood the difference, it was too late. He's quite something, isn't he? A woman's voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to find an elegant older woman observing me with knowing eyes. Dominic Westbrook. The man has a presence that fills a room. He certainly does, I agreed neutrally. I'm Eleanor Harrington, she introduced herself. My husband sits on Westbrook's board. Maya Reynolds, Brightwood Foundation. Ah, the Education Initiative. Excellent work you're doing. She sipped her champagne, her gaze still shrewd. You know him well, Dominic? We're acquainted from years ago, I said carefully. Different lifetime, really? She studied me with interest. You know, in all the years I've known Dominic, I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you earlier. And how was that? Like a man seeing a ghost. Or perhaps remembering something he'd lost. She smiled slightly. Forgive an old woman's observations. I find people fascinating, especially those who believe they've buried their emotions so deeply no one can see them. Before I could respond, she drifted away, leaving me unsettled by her perceptiveness. Had others noticed that charged moment between Dominic and me? Was I as transparent as I feared? As the evening progressed, I began to relax slightly. Dominic had made no further attempts to approach me, and I'd successfully connected Director Harlow with several promising funding sources. Perhaps I could slip away now, mission accomplished with minimal damage. I was retrieving my wrap from the coat check when a commotion rippled through the ballroom behind me. Turning, I saw a cluster of people gathering near the main stage, voices rising in concern. Security personnel moved quickly through the crowd, and somewhere, a woman called for a doctor. Curiosity and concern pulled me back toward the disturbance. As I approached, the crowd parted momentarily, giving me a clear view of what had happened. Dominic Westbrook lay unconscious on the floor, his face ashen, a thin line of blood trailing from his temple where he must have struck something as he fell. Does anyone have medical training? A security guard was asking, his voice tight with urgency. The ambulance is on its way, but I do. The voice came from behind me, young but confident. A voice I would recognize anywhere. I turned in disbelief, watching as my 16-year-old son who was supposed to be across town at Vivian's apartment, pushed through the crowd with purpose. Lucas, I whispered, but he didn't hear me, already kneeling beside Dominic's still form. I'm a certified EMT, he was saying to the security guard, his hands already moving to check Dominic's pulse. Part of my hospital internship program. I stood frozen, watching as my son, with his father's strong profile and my determined chin, efficiently assessed Dominic's condition. Lucas loosened Dominic's tie, checked his breathing, and placed him in the recovery position with practiced movements. His pulse is rapid but strong, Lucas reported to someone on the phone, presumably emergency services. Breathing is shallow but unobstructed, pupils equal and reactive. No signs of seizure activity. The surreality of the moment washed over me in waves. My son, who had never met his father, was now quite literally holding Dominic's life in his hands, completely unaware of the connection between them. As if sensing my gaze, Lucas glanced up, his eyes widening in recognition. "Mom? What are you doing here?" Before I could answer, Dominic stirred, a low groan escaping his lips as his eyes fluttered open. For one heart-stopping moment, father and son looked directly at each other, separated by 16 years of absence, yet connected by unmistakable biology. "Stay still, sir," Lucas instructed, his voice steady despite the confusion I could see in his eyes. "You lost consciousness. An ambulance is on the way." Dominic's gaze, still disoriented, moved from Lucas to me, standing just behind my son. I saw the exact moment recognition dawned, not just of me, but of the impossible truth before him. His eyes widened, color draining further from his already pale face. "Maya," he whispered, his voice rough. Then, looking back at Lucas, "Who?" "This is Lucas," I said quietly, moving to kneel beside my son. "He's an EMT in training. And he's my son." Our son, I didn't say, but I didn't need to. The truth was written in every line of Lucas's face, in the set of his jaw, in the analytical intensity of his gaze as he continued to monitor Dominic's vital signs. "The ambulance should be here any minute," Lucas said, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around him. "Your blood pressure is probably low. Have you been taking any medications? Any history of heart problems or seizures?" Dominic couldn't seem to tear his eyes away from Lucas's face. "No," he managed. "No medical conditions. He works too much and sleeps too little," I added, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Always has." Lucas glanced between us, his brow furrowing. "You two know each other?" The question hung in the air, loaded with 16 years of secrets and silence. Before either of us could answer, paramedics pushed through the crowd, equipment in hand. Lucas immediately began relaying information to them in the clipped, professional language of emergency medicine. I stepped back, watching as my son, my brilliant, compassionate son who had decided at 12 that he wanted to save lives, handed Dominic's care over to the professionals. Pride and fear tangled in my chest, making it difficult to breathe. As the paramedics prepared to transport Dominic, his eyes found mine again over the oxygen mask they'd placed on his face. There was a question in them, an urgency that had nothing to do with his physical condition. "Go with them," Lucas said, suddenly at my side. "He keeps looking at you." "Lucas, I can't." "Mom." My son's expression was puzzled but determined. "I don't know what's going on between you two, but that man clearly wants you there. And I've never seen you look at anyone the way you're looking at him right now." "How am I looking at him?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Like you're seeing a ghost," Lucas said simply. "Like you're terrified and angry and something else I can't quite name. Perceptive." He'd always been too perceptive for his own good. "I need to take you home," I said, reaching for normalcy in the midst of chaos. "You shouldn't even be here. Why aren't you at Aunt Vivian's?" "The research symposium ended early, and I wanted to surprise you." Lucas ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that it made my heart ache. "I tracked your phone to here. I was just about to text you when that man collapsed." The paramedics were moving Dominic toward the exit now. As they passed, his hand shot out, grasping weakly at my wrist. "Maya," he said, his voice muffled by the oxygen mask. "Please." 2 syllables. After 16 years of silence, just 2 syllables. But I heard what he couldn't say with an audience present. With our son standing beside me, "We need to talk." "Go," Lucas urged again. "I'll catch a ride home with Aunt Vivian. She's on her way. I texted her when I saw you." Of course he had. My practical, thoughtful son who had no idea he'd just saved his father's life. "Lucas," I began, not even sure what I was going to say. "It's okay, Mom." He squeezed my hand. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. We always do. We always do. Just the two of us against the world." From the moment I'd held him in my arms and promised that what he lacked in a father's presence, I would make up for with the fierceness of my love. But now Dominic knew, and judging by the intensity in his eyes as the paramedics wheeled him away, everything was about to change. If you've ever had a moment when you knew your life was about to be irrevocably altered, comment below. Sometimes we can feel the axis of our world shifting before we fully understand what's happening. I followed the ambulance to Manhattan Memorial in a daze, memories flooding back with each passing street. This was the hospital where Lucas had been born, where I had held my newborn son alone. No hand to squeeze during labor, no proud father to count tiny fingers and toes. Where I had given him my last name instead of Dominic's, the first of many decisions made to protect him from a world that could be cruelly dismissive of distractions. By the time I reached Dominic's private room, the benefits of wealth ensuring he bypassed the emergency department's usual wait. He was sitting up, looking remarkably composed for someone who had collapsed less than an hour ago. The oxygen mask was gone, replaced by a small bandage at his temple where he'd struck the floor. Vasovagal syncope, he said as I entered, his clinical tone at odds with the intensity of his gaze. Apparently my body decided to dramatically lower my heart rate and blood pressure without consulting me first. The doctors say it's benign. Nothing about you has ever been benign, Dominic. I remained standing near the door, maintaining distance between us. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Still direct. I've always appreciated that about you. What do you want? I asked, cutting through the pleasantries. You asked me to come, so I'm here. He's mine. Not a question. A statement of fact, delivered with the same certainty Dominic applied to everything in his life. Biologically, yes. I crossed my arms. A defensive posture I couldn't help. In every way that matters? No. You made your choice 16 years ago. I made a mistake. The simple admission hung in the air between us. In all the years I'd known him, through our whirlwind romance and its bitter end, I had never heard Dominic Westbrook admit to a mistake. A mistake, I repeated, the words tasting like ash. Is that what you call writing a check and telling me to take care of it? Is that what you call 16 years of absence? The anger I'd contained for so long threatened to spill over. Lucas is not a business deal gone wrong that you can simply renegotiate, Dominic. He winced, whether from my words or from pain. I couldn't tell. I deserve that. I deserve worse. He gestured to the chair beside his bed. Please sit, just for a moment. Against my better judgment, I sat, though I maintained my rigid posture, unwilling to show any sign of softening. He's remarkable, Dominic said quietly. Lucas, even in those few minutes, his composure, his knowledge, the way he took control of the situation. He wants to be a doctor. He's been working toward it since he was 12. Like his mother, that same determination. Dominic's eyes held mine. But he has my analytical mind, doesn't he? The way he assessed the situation, categorized the symptoms. I looked away, uncomfortable with his accurate assessment. Why were you asking about him earlier? How did you even know about the science competition? Dominic was silent for a moment, his fingers absently adjusting the hospital bracelet on his wrist. I've known about him for 3 years. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. What? It was coincidence, initially. A photograph in the Tribune's education section, a group of middle school students who'd won some robotics championship. I almost turned the page, but something about one of the faces caught my attention. His voice grew softer. He has your smile. But when I looked closer, I saw myself in him too. My mind raced, trying to remember the article, trying to process the implications. You've been watching us for 3 years and never said anything? I had no right to, Dominic said simply. I gave up that right when I chose Westbrook Industries over you. Over him. Then why now? What's changed? He looked down at his hands, strong, capable hands that had built an empire but had never once held his son. I have. Or perhaps I'm finally seeing clearly what I've lost. He met my gaze again. When you walk away from humanity for long enough, Maya, you stop recognizing it in yourself. I wanted to dismiss his words as manipulation, as the calculated charm he'd always wielded so effectively. But there was something different in his eyes now, a vulnerability I'd never seen before, not even in our most intimate moments. "Lucas doesn't know about you," I said, my voice firm despite the turmoil inside. "He thinks his father was a graduate student I dated briefly who wasn't ready for fatherhood. He stopped asking for details years ago. A convenient fiction. A necessary protection," I countered. What was I supposed to tell him? That his father considered him a distraction from a merger? That he was willing to pay to make sure Lucas was never born? Dominic flinched visibly. I was a different person then, driven by ambition to the exclusion of everything else. I thought success meant never compromising, never allowing anything to divert me from my goals. He gestured around the hospital room. "Look where that got me." "You got exactly what you wanted, Dominic. Westbrook Industries is one of the most successful companies in the country. You're on the Forbes list every year. And I collapsed alone at my own gala, only to be saved by the son I abandoned." The irony in his voice was tinged with genuine regret. Not exactly the legacy I envisioned. Legacy. It always came back to legacy with men like Dominic. I stood, suddenly weary of the conversation. "I should go. Lucas will be waiting." "Maya, wait." Dominic sat forward, wincing slightly at the movement. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even asking for a place in his life. Not yet. But I would like the chance to know him, to see if there's any way I can make amends for what I've done." "That's not my decision to make," I said after a long moment. "Lucas is 16, old enough to decide for himself if he wants to know you. You'd tell him the truth?" "I've never lied to him, Dominic. I've omitted details, protected him from pain, but I've never lied. If he asks directly, I'll tell him who you are." Hope flickered across his face, quickly tempered by understanding. "And if he doesn't want to know me? Then you'll respect his decision, just as I've respected yours all these years." I moved toward the door, pausing with my hand on the handle. "For what it's worth, he's the best person I know. Whatever you missed by not being in his life, it's your loss, not his." I left without looking back, the weight of 16 years of secrets pressing down on me with each step. Outside the hospital, the December air was sharp with cold, the night sky clear and star-filled above the city lights. I took a deep breath, letting the chill clear my head. My phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. "Everything okay? Aunt Viv and I are at your place with hot chocolate and questions." Questions. Of course there would be questions. My perceptive, brilliant son would have noticed the tension, the recognition, the unspoken history between his mother and the man whose life he'd saved. And I would have to decide how much of the truth to share. As I hailed a taxi, another text came through. This one from an unknown number. "Thank you for coming tonight. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just for tonight, but for all of it. D. Dominic," who had apparently wasted no time in obtaining my number. Typical. When he wanted something, barriers simply ceased to exist for him. The taxi pulled up, and I slid into the back seat, giving the driver my address. As we pulled away from the hospital, I found myself looking back at the illuminated building, wondering if Dominic was watching from his window, if he could see the taxi disappearing into the flow of city traffic. 16 years ago, I had driven away from him in a similar taxi, tears streaming down my face, one hand protectively cradling my still flat stomach. I had been shattered then, my heart broken not just by rejection but by the revelation that the man I loved valued ambition over humanity, even the humanity we had created together. Tonight, I felt no tears, no shattering grief, only a strange, calm certainty that whatever happened next would reshape all our lives. Lucas would have questions, and I would answer them honestly. What he chose to do with those answers, whether to reach out to the father who had never reached for him, or to maintain the distance that had defined their non-relationship, would be entirely his decision. If you believe that honesty, even when painful, is the foundation of any healthy relationship, hit that subscribe button. Sometimes the hardest conversations are the most necessary ones. The lights were on in my apartment when I arrived home, warm yellow squares against the dark December night. I paused outside the door, gathering my courage for what would undoubtedly be one of the most difficult conversations of my life. When I entered, Lucas and Vivian were sitting at the kitchen table, mugs of hot chocolate between them. They both looked up as I closed the door, their expressions a study in contrasts. Vivian's knowing and concerned, Lucas's curious and confused. "Hey," Lucas said, pushing a third mug toward me. "Made you some too." "Thanks, sweetheart." I hung up my coat and joined them at the table, wrapping my cold hands around the warm ceramic. "How's your patient?" "Stable when I left. The paramedics said it was probably just a vasovagal episode. Nothing serious." Lucas studied my face. "But that's not really what you're asking, is it?" I exchanged a glance with Vivian, who nodded slightly. She'd always been my rock, my confidant through every challenge of single motherhood. She knew this moment had been inevitable from the beginning. "No," I admitted. "It's not. You know him." Lucas's statement was direct, his eyes, so like his father's, searching mine for truth. "That man, Dominic Westbrook. And he knows you." "Yes." "How?" I took a deep breath. "We were involved, briefly, many years ago, before you were born." Lucas processed this, his analytical mind visibly connecting dots. "He's not just someone you knew. There's more to it than that." I could feel it in the room. The way he looked at you, the way you reacted to him. "You're right." I reached across the table and took his hand. "Lucas, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago. He's my father, isn't he?" Lucas said quietly. "Watch out for part 2.